Welcome to another story on Cheating Tales Lab. We're so happy to have you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. Ethan Reeves guided his beat-up pickup into the driveway of his modest suburban home, a rare smile playing on his oil-stained face. The skilled diesel mechanic had managed to wrangle an early release from Big Rig Revival, determined to surprise his wife Olivia on Valentine's Day. He killed the engine, grabbed a small bouquet of carnations from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the crisp February air. As he approached the house, an unfamiliar sound stopped him in his tracks. Laughter, deep and masculine, mingled with the melodic tones of Olivia's voice. Ethan's brow furrowed. They weren't expecting company, were they? He hesitated at the front door, key in hand. Something fell off. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, just like they did when he sensed a problem with an engine that wasn't immediately apparent. Shaking off the feeling, Ethan turned the key and stepped inside. The laughter grew louder, emanating from the living room. He rounded the corner and froze. Olivia, his wife of 12 years, was wrapped in the arms of a man Ethan had never seen before. The stranger was tall, clean-cut, and wearing an expensive-looking suit that made Ethan acutely aware of the grease stains on his own work clothes. In the man's free hand was an extravagant bouquet of exotic flowers that made Ethan's carnations look like weeds. The couple broke apart at Ethan's entrance, but the stranger didn't let go of Olivia. Instead, he fixed Ethan with a confident smirk and said, "You must be the husband. I'm Dr. Cameron Vance." Ethan's mind reeled. Dr. Vance. The name was vaguely familiar. The new pediatrician at Olivia's hospital. He'd heard her mention him in passing, but never like this. Before Ethan could form a response, Cameron turned back to Olivia. He presented her with the elaborate bouquet and planted a passionate kiss on her lips. "Pack your bags, darling," he declared. "It's time to leave this dead-end life behind." Ethan felt like he'd been sucker-punched. He looked to Olivia, waiting for her to deny it, to push this arrogant doctor away. But she didn't. Instead, she met Ethan's gaze head-on, her blue eyes devoid of the warmth they once held for him. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "Cameron and I, we've been seeing each other for 3 years now, since he started at the hospital." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. 3 years, half of their marriage, tainted by lies. In a moment of shocked anger, Ethan found his voice. "If you walk out that door with him, Olivia, we're done. 12 years of marriage gone. There's no coming back from this." Olivia hesitated, her eyes flickering between Ethan and Cameron. For a brief moment, Ethan thought she might reconsider. But then she squared her shoulders, grabbed her purse, and walked towards the door. "I'll be back for my things," she said, not meeting Ethan's eyes. And just like that, she was gone, leaving Ethan standing alone in their once-shared home, a bouquet of wilting carnations clutched in his trembling hand. The weeks following Olivia's departure blurred together for Ethan. He moved through his days in a haze of anger and depression, barely registering the world around him. His work at Big Rig Revival suffered as a result. One particularly bad day, after Ethan had botched a simple oil change, his boss Gina Ortiz pulled him aside. Her usually stern face was etched with concern. "Ethan, what's going on with you?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "You've been off your game for weeks now. I hate to do this, but I've got to give you an ultimatum. You've got 4 weeks to get your act together, or I'll have to let you go. We can't afford mistakes in this business." Ethan nodded numbly, knowing he should feel more concerned about potentially losing his job. But the threat of unemployment felt distant compared to the constant ache in his chest. That evening, hoping to drown his sorrows in a greasy burger, Ethan found himself at the local diner. As he waited for his order, he overheard a snippet of conversation from the booth behind him. "Can you believe Olivia finally left that grease monkey husband of hers? About time, if you ask me. She and Dr. Vance have been the worst-kept secret at the hospital for years." Ethan's hand clenched around his water glass. The worst-kept secret. Everyone had known except him. He'd been the town fool, oblivious to his wife's infidelity, while the rest of their social circle whispered and laughed behind his back. Abandoning his uneaten meal, Ethan drove to the bank, a new thought nagging at him. When he checked their joint account, his suspicions were confirmed. The $50,000 they'd painstakingly saved over the years gone, withdrawn by Olivia the day after she'd left. Financially strained and emotionally drained, Ethan found himself on the doorstep of his childhood friend, Ray Daniels. Ray, now a therapist, listened patiently as Ethan poured out his story. "I know it hurts, man," Ray said when Ethan finished, "but you've got to move on. Olivia made her choice. Don't let her destroy you." But even as Ethan nodded in agreement, he felt something shift inside him. The pain that had been consuming him began to harden, transforming into a thirst for retribution. Olivia and Cameron had humiliated him, betrayed him, stolen from him. They couldn't be allowed to get away with it. As Ethan left Ray's office, his mind was already working, plotting how he could make them pay. Weeks passed, and Ethan found himself working late at Big Rig Revival, trying to make up for his earlier mistakes and keep his job. As he tinkered with a particularly stubborn engine, he overheard two truckers talking in low voices near the office. "Heard the road reapers are having trouble with their runs." One of them was saying, "Increased police patrols are making it hard for them to move their stuff across state lines." Ethan's ears perked up. He'd heard of the road reapers before, a notorious biker gang known for trafficking illegal substances. Not the kind of crowd he'd ever associated with before. The other trucker snorted. "Serves them right, but they'll find a way around it. They always do." As the truckers moved away, Ethan's mind raced. An idea was forming, a dangerous, reckless idea that went against everything he'd ever believed in. But the thought of Olivia and Cameron, living it up with his hard-earned money while he struggled to keep his job, made his blood boil. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was illegal. But the desire for revenge overwhelmed his better judgment. Over the next few days, Ethan did his research. He learned everything he could about the road reapers, their operations, and their vehicles. Then, steeling his nerves, he made his way to a seedy bar on the outskirts of town, known to be a hangout for the gang. The bar was dimly lit and smelled of stale beer and cigarettes. Ethan felt woefully out of place in his work jeans and flannel shirt, surrounded by leather-clad bikers. But he spotted his target, Axel Krieger, the road reapers' leader, at a corner table and approached with feigned confidence. "Axel Krieger?" Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've got a proposition for you." Axel, a mountain of a man with a bushy beard and arms covered in tattoos, looked up at Ethan with amusement. "And who might you be, little man?" Ethan swallowed hard but pressed on. "I'm a mechanic, a damn good one. I heard you've been having trouble with your transportation. I can help. I can modify your bikes, make them faster, stealthier, add hidden compartments that no cop would ever find." Axel's eyes narrowed. "And why would a straight-laced mechanic want to get mixed up with us?" "Let's just say I've got my reasons," Ethan replied, thinking of Olivia and Cameron. "You don't need to know them. All you need to know is that I can help you stay ahead of the law." Axel studied Ethan for a long moment, then barked out a laugh. "You've got balls. I'll give you that. All right, we'll give you a trial run. One bike. If you can do what you say, maybe we'll talk more." Ethan nodded, relief and trepidation warring inside him. As he left the bar, he realized he'd just taken his first step down a very dark path. But the thought of Olivia and Cameron's shocked faces when their perfect new life came crashing down around them steeled his resolve. He'd show them what happened when you betrayed Ethan Reeves, and the road reapers were going to help him do it. Ethan Reeves sat in the dim light of his basement, the glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he contemplated his next move. The past few weeks working with the road reapers had given him access to resources he'd never imagined. Now, it was time to put them to use. He opened a new email account, one that couldn't be traced back to him. The message he composed was brief but damning. To the hospital board, I am writing to express grave concerns about the professional conduct of Dr. Cameron Vance and Nurse Olivia Reeves. Their inappropriate relationship has become a liability to patient care. Ethan's finger lingered over the send button. A small voice in the back of his mind whispered that this was wrong, that he was crossing a line. But then he remembered Olivia's cold eyes as she walked out on their marriage, and Cameron's smug smile. His jaw clenched, and he hit send. But that was just the beginning. Ethan knew that to truly devastate them professionally, he needed more. His time with the Road Reapers had taught him that everyone had secrets, and those secrets could be weaponized. Using the skills he'd picked up from the gang's tech guy, Ethan managed to access the hospital's pharmacy records. It took him hours of painstaking work, but eventually he was able to manipulate the data. To anyone looking closely, it would appear that Olivia had been falsifying prescriptions for painkillers. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but think about how Olivia had always been so proud of her nursing career. She'd worked hard to get where she was, putting herself through school while he worked extra shifts at the garage to make ends meet. Now, he was systematically destroying everything she'd built. The thought should have made him feel guilty, but all he felt was a cold satisfaction. The final piece of his plan required a bit more hands-on involvement. Ethan reached out to his contact in the Road Reapers, a wiry man named Spike who always seemed to be vibrating with nervous energy. I need something, Ethan said when they met in a deserted parking lot. Just a small amount, enough to ruin someone. Spike eyed him warily. This ain't for personal use, is it? 'Cause Axel won't like that. Ethan shook his head. It's for a job. That's all you need to know. Spike hesitated, then shrugged. He pulled out a small baggie filled with white powder. Your funeral, man. With the final piece in place, Ethan put his plan into motion. He knew Cameron's schedule, knew when he'd be at the hospital. It was almost too easy to plant the drugs in the doctor's car. Then came another anonymous tip, this time to the police. There's a doctor at Memorial Hospital dealing drugs from his car. His name is Cameron Vance. Ethan watched from across the street as the police pulled Cameron over on his way home from work. He saw the confusion on Cameron's face turn to shock as the officers found the planted drugs. As they cuffed him and put him in the back of the patrol car, Ethan felt a surge of triumph. The next day, the hospital was in chaos. Both Olivia and Cameron had been suspended pending investigation. Rumors flew about drug dealing and falsified prescriptions. Ethan observed it all from a distance, his face a mask of concerned confusion whenever anyone at Big Rig Revival mentioned the scandal. As he drove home that evening, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 of his revenge was complete, but he was far from done. Ethan knew that to truly destroy Olivia and Cameron, he needed to hit them where it would hurt the most, their wallets. But for this, he needed help beyond what the Road Reapers could provide. Through his connections with the gang, Ethan was put in touch with a hacker known only as Ghost. They met in a nondescript coffee shop, Ghost's face hidden behind the glow of a laptop screen. I need access to some email accounts and financial records, Ethan said, sliding a piece of paper across the table with Olivia and Cameron's information. Ghost raised an eyebrow. That's some personal stuff you're after. Sure you want to go down this road? Ethan's face hardened. They went down this road when they decided to destroy my life. I'm just returning the favor. Ghost shrugged and got to work. Within hours, Ethan had full access to Olivia and Cameron's email accounts and financial records. What he saw made his blood boil. They had been planning their new life together for months, discussing investments and future plans with his money. With Ghost's help, Ethan began to systematically dismantle their financial lives. He emptied their personal accounts and investment portfolios, carefully making the transactions appear as if Olivia and Cameron were involved in a complex money laundering scheme. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but think about the life he and Olivia had planned together. They were supposed to grow old in that modest suburban house, maybe have a couple of kids. Now, he was ensuring they wouldn't even be able to rent a decent apartment. Next came their credit histories. Ghost showed Ethan how to manipulate the data, tanking their credit scores to the point where they wouldn't be able to get a loan for a candy bar, let alone a house or car. The final touch was an anonymous report to the IRS, complete with falsified evidence of hidden income. Ethan knew from his own tax troubles years ago how ruthless the IRS could be. He almost felt sorry for what was coming their way. Almost. As the days passed, Ethan watched from afar as Olivia and Cameron's world crumbled around them. He saw them arguing outside the hospital, saw the stress and fear etched on their faces as they were turned away from banks and real estate offices. One evening, as Ethan was leaving Big Rig Revival, he overheard two nurses gossiping by their cars. "Did you hear about Olivia and that doctor she ran off with?" One said. "Apparently, they're under investigation for money laundering or something. All their accounts are frozen." "Serves them right," the other replied. "Karma's a bitch." Ethan allowed himself a small smirk as he got into his truck. Karma indeed. Ethan was elbow deep in the engine of a semi when he heard the commotion. Angry voices echoed through the garage, growing louder as they approached. He recognized them immediately and felt a mix of anticipation and dread coil in his stomach. "Where is he?" Cameron's voice boomed. "Where's that bastard Ethan?" Ethan slowly extracted himself from the engine, wiping his hands on a rag as he turned to face the approaching storm. Olivia and Cameron stood before him, their once polished appearances now ragged and desperate. Olivia's eyes, once cold when she left him, now burned with a mixture of anger and pleading. "Ethan, what have you done?" Ethan kept his face carefully neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia. I've been here, doing my job." Cameron surged forward, his face red with rage. "Don't play dumb, you grease monkey. Our lives are in ruins, and I know you're behind it somehow." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his voice calm despite the hammering of his heart. "Sounds like you've had a rough time, but I fail to see how that's my problem. You made your choices." "Choices?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Ethan, we're being investigated by the IRS. The hospital board is talking about revoking our licenses. We can't even get a credit card. This goes way beyond our mistake." Ethan felt a flicker of satisfaction at her use of the word mistake, but he squashed it down. "That sounds awful," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But again, I don't see what it has to do with me. I'm just a mechanic, remember?" Cameron's control snapped. With a roar of frustration, he lunged at Ethan, grabbing him by the front of his coveralls. "You smug son of a—" But before he could finish, a new voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan looked over Cameron's shoulder to see Axel and two other road reapers standing at the entrance to the garage. They must have come for their weekly vehicle checkup. Cameron, oblivious to the danger, sneered at the newcomers. "This doesn't concern you. This is between me and this lying piece of—" Axel stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing Cameron. "I think you'll find it does concern us. Ethan here is under our protection, so I suggest you take your hands off him. Now." The color drained from Cameron's face as he realized the situation he was in. He released Ethan and stepped back, pulling Olivia behind him protectively. The tense standoff was broken by the sudden wail of police sirens. Ethan's eyes widened in genuine surprise. He hadn't planned this. Gina's voice called out from the office. "I hit the silent alarm when I saw the confrontation. The police are on their way." Panic flashed across Cameron's face. Ethan watched as he surreptitiously reached into his pocket, presumably to dispose of any remaining evidence from his arrest. But he wasn't fast enough. Two police officers burst into the garage, hands on their weapons. "What's going on here?" One of the officers recognized Cameron. "Dr. Vance? Didn't we just arrest you last week?" Before Cameron could respond, the officer noticed his suspicious movement. "Sir, please remove your hand from your pocket slowly." Cameron complied, his face ashen. The officer approached and reached into Cameron's pocket, pulling out a small bag with trace amounts of white powder. "Well, well, the officer said, his voice hard. "Looks like we've got ourselves a repeat offender." As the officers cuffed Cameron and read him his rights, Ethan caught Olivia's eye. The look she gave him was one of dawning realization and horror. She knew. She finally understood the extent of what he'd done. Ethan maintained his innocent facade, but inside, he felt a rush of dark triumph. As Cameron was led away and Olivia stood alone, her world crumbling around her, Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The Road Reapers melted away as the police took statements, leaving Ethan to spin a tale of being unfairly confronted by his ex-wife and her unstable boyfriend. Gina backed up his story, and soon, the garage was quiet once more. As Ethan returned to the engine he'd been working on, he realized that his revenge was complete. Olivia and Cameron's professional lives were in shambles. Their finances were ruined, and now Cameron was facing serious criminal charges. But as the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, Ethan felt an unexpected emptiness. He picked up his wrench and dove back into his work. He couldn't shake the feeling that this victory might be more dangerous than he'd anticipated. Ethan Reeves stepped out of his apartment building. The cool morning air a welcome respite from the stuffy interior. He'd been lying low since the confrontation at Big Rig Revival, taking some time off work to avoid suspicion. As he walked to his truck, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The street was quiet, too quiet for a weekday morning. Ethan's eyes darted from side to side, his newfound paranoia making every shadow seem threatening. He was reaching for his truck door when he heard it, the low rumble of motorcycles approaching fast. Ethan's heart rate spiked. This wasn't the familiar sound of the Road Reapers' bikes. These engines were different, angrier somehow. He turned just in time to see a group of motorcycles round the corner, their riders clad in leather jackets emblazoned with a coiled viper. The Steel Vipers. Ethan had heard whispers about them from the Road Reapers. They were rivals, constantly fighting over territory and drug routes. But what were they doing here? Ethan didn't have time to ponder the question. The lead rider raised his arm, and Ethan caught the glint of sunlight on metal. His body reacted before his mind could process what was happening. He dove behind his truck just as the first shots rang out. The sound of gunfire filled the air, accompanied by the shattering of glass and the ping of bullets hitting metal. Ethan's truck rocked with the impact of multiple rounds. He curled into a ball, hands over his head, praying for it to end. As quickly as it had started, the attack was over. The roar of motorcycles faded into the distance, leaving behind a ringing silence punctuated by car alarms and distant screams. Ethan cautiously raised his head. His truck was riddled with bullet holes, the windows shattered. Across the street, he saw his neighbors peeking out from behind curtains, their faces pale with shock. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed 911. As he waited for the operator to pick up, the reality of what had just happened hit him like a physical blow. The Steel Vipers had targeted him. They must believe he was a key player in the Road Reapers operation. His revenge plot against Olivia and Cameron had spiraled far beyond his control. He was no longer just playing at being a criminal. He was in the middle of a gang war, and he had just become a primary target. As sirens wailed in the distance, Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't go to the police. That would mean admitting to his involvement with the Road Reapers. But he couldn't just sit back and wait for the next attack either. He needed a plan, a way to extricate himself from this mess before it got him killed. As he gave his statement to the responding officers, carefully omitting any mention of his connection to the Road Reapers, an idea began to form. If he was caught in the middle of a gang war, maybe he could use that to his advantage, play both sides against each other, and come out clean on the other side. It was risky, potentially suicidal even. But as Ethan looked at the bullet-riddled remains of his truck, he realized he was out of options. He was going to have to outsmart two of the most dangerous gangs in the state, and he was going to have to do it fast. Ethan sat in a dingy motel room, his laptop open before him. He'd been here for days, using the skills he'd picked up from Ghost to create a web of false information. It was time to set his plan in motion. First, He fabricated evidence suggesting that the Road Reapers were planning to hijack the Steel Viper's next major shipment. He planted this information in places he knew the Vipers would find it: encrypted messages on dark web forums, whispers in the right ears at seedy bars. Then he did the same for the Road Reapers, creating a mirror image of the plot, but with the Vipers as the would-be hijackers. He made sure to use different methods, different styles of communication. It had to look like two separate plans, not one person playing puppet master. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come. From a simple mechanic to a man orchestrating a showdown between two notorious gangs. He wondered what Olivia would think if she could see him now. Would she be impressed, horrified, or would she just see the same grease monkey she'd left behind? With the bait set, Ethan moved on to the next phase of his plan. He created an anonymous email account and composed a message to both gangs. A major shipment of product is coming through your territory next week. Details enclosed. This is your chance to take out your rivals once and for all. He attached the fabricated details of the fictional shipment, making sure the information was vague enough to be believable but specific enough to ensure both gangs would converge at the same place and time. Ethan's finger hovered over the send button. Once he did this, there would be no going back. He thought about Olivia, about Cameron, about how this had all started with a simple desire for revenge. Now, he was about to potentially cause a bloodbath. But then he remembered the drive-by shooting, the terror he'd felt as bullets whizzed past his head. It was them or him now. He hit send. With the gangs primed for conflict, Ethan turned his attention to law enforcement. He couldn't go to the local police. Too risky. But he knew from his time with the Road Reapers that there was a DEA task force in the area, one that had been trying to bring down both gangs for years. Using another anonymous email account, Ethan reached out to the DEA. He provided detailed information about both gangs' operations, information he'd gleaned during his time with the Road Reapers and through his own investigations. And most importantly, he gave him the time and location of the impending gang confrontation. As he sent the final email, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd done all he could. Now, he just had to wait and hope his plan worked. The night of the supposed shipment arrived. Ethan watched from a safe distance as vehicles belonging to both gangs converged on the abandoned warehouse he'd specified in his tips. He could see the tension in the air, the way both sides moved with wary aggression. Just as the first shots were fired, a fleet of unmarked vehicles swarmed the area. DEA agents poured out, weapons drawn. The resulting chaos was beyond anything Ethan had imagined. Gunfire erupted from all sides as gang members tried to flee or fight back. Ethan watched, his heart pounding, as dozens of gang members were arrested. He recognized Axel among those being led away in handcuffs. The man who had once terrified him now looked small and defeated. As the dust settled, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. His plan had worked. Both the Road Reapers and the Steel Vipers had been effectively dismantled in one fell swoop. His connection to the underworld was severed. But as he turned to leave, Ethan realized something that wiped the smile from his face. Yes, he was free from the gang's influence, but he was also without their protection, and he had just made a lot of dangerous enemies. The weeks following the gang bust were tense for Ethan. He half expected the police to show up at his door at any moment, to reveal that they'd discovered his role in the whole affair. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, he began to relax. It was a crisp fall morning when there was finally a knock at his door. Ethan's heart leaped into his throat, but when he opened it, he found not the police, but a pair of DEA agents. "Mr. Reeves," one of them said, "we'd like to ask you a few questions about the recent gang activity in the area." Ethan's palms began to sweat, but he nodded and invited them in. For the next hour, he answered their questions as vaguely as possible, sticking to half-truths and carefully constructed lies. To his surprise, the agent seemed less interested in interrogating him and more in thanking him. "Mr. Reeves," the lead agent said as they were preparing to leave, We want you to know that the information you provided was instrumental in bringing down two of the most dangerous gangs in the state. Ethan blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what information? The agent smiled knowingly. Come now, Mr. Reeves. We're well aware that you were the anonymous tipster who led us to the warehouse that night. Your detailed knowledge of both gangs' operations was invaluable. Ethan's mind raced. They thought he was some kind of upstanding citizen informant, not a man out for revenge who had gotten in way over his head. We'd like to offer you a commendation for your service, the agent continued. It'll be private, of course. We understand the need for discretion in these matters. As the agents left, Ethan stood in his doorway, stunned. He had gone from a man on the verge of losing everything to a celebrated informant in the eyes of law enforcement. The irony was almost too much to bear. Weeks passed, and life began to return to normal. Ethan went back to work at Big Rig Revival. His newfound status as a community hero, the story had leaked, despite the DA's promises of discretion, earning him a promotion from Gina. It was on a quiet Sunday afternoon that Ethan's past came knocking once again. He opened his door to find Olivia standing there, looking pale and drawn. Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? He let her in, more out of shock than any desire to hear what she had to say. Olivia sat on his couch, wringing her hands. I've made a terrible mistake, Ethan, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Cameron, he's in prison. Our lives are ruined. I see now how foolish I was to throw away what we had. Ethan listened silently as Olivia poured out her heart, begging for forgiveness, asking for another chance. A part of him, the part that still remembered the happy years of their marriage, wanted to take her in his arms and tell her all was forgiven. But as he looked at her, all he could see was a woman who had walked out on him, who had drained their savings and left him with nothing but a thirst for revenge that had nearly gotten him killed. I'm sorry, Olivia, he said, his voice gentle but firm, but that chapter of our lives is over. I've moved on. I think you should too. The look of devastation on Olivia's face as she left was something Ethan knew would stay with him for a long time. But as he closed the door behind her, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in months. With his newfound reputation and the modest reward money from the DEA, Ethan was able to secure a loan to start his own business. He called it Reeves Custom Rigs, a specialty truck modification shop that would allow him to put his skills to use on his own terms. On the day of the grand opening, Ethan stood outside his new shop, surrounded by friends and well-wishers. Gina was there, beaming with pride at her former employee. Even Ray had shown up, clearly relieved to see Ethan looking happy and healthy. As he cut the ribbon to officially open Reeves Custom Rigs, Ethan felt a sense of optimism he hadn't experienced in years. He had walked through fire, made mistakes, and nearly lost everything. But he had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and ready for a fresh start. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan Reeves was looking forward to the journey. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.